parallel outline of the social development of humanity. Whether there is a purpose, a meaning in the development of societies, or it is just left to nature, whether it is just a cyclic society turning round and round as described in some of the religious theologies. Somewhere in about 1913 or 14, a German thinker called Lamprecht, he wrote a thesis underlining that there is an intelligence governing the development of human societies, and he described the main stages as the symbolic and the religious, then the conventional, then the individualistic, then the subjective age. Sri Aurobindo took that as a starting point and observed that the expressions used by the German philosopher were very significant, though the inferences drawn by him were not very satisfactory, and they stood somewhere midway. And he went on to give his own analysis, though using the same terms, for describing the different stages of the social development of humanity. The first stage all over the world of human society is where the people are very intuitive in their grasp of things. The reasoning mind has not developed enough, and these people feel very much at home with nature, and they have a kind of religious mind. They become aware of presences, powers behind the physical objects and phenomena. Everything that they see symbolizes for them some other greater realities. Thus, a storm, wind, rain, all these are seen by them as movements caused by or presided over by certain presences or powers not physically visible. Also, all objects symbolize for them something behind, and they have an intuitive perception that the external world is only a symbol of a larger, subtler existence, and the powers that are behind nature conducting natural operations, they call gods or goddesses or deities, and they worship them. They establish means of communication with these powers, and not everywhere usually it is around the institution of sacrifice that their communion with these deities is based. For them, their language is very living. It is not a conventional language, but a language born on the crest of feeling and experience. And they express their adoration, reverence, relation with these higher powers in a language, in words that are themselves symbolic. They mean one thing to the common people, the latter, and to those who are initiated, they mean something deeper. And thus, the early stage of societies all over the world is religious, intuitive, governed by a symbolic mentality. They organize life based on these truths that they experience. Gradually, however, the intuitive age recedes, and other faculties in the human being, they come to be developed, and a kind of mechanical pattern sets in. If the early settlers organize their social system and life on the basis of their intuitive perceptions, those who follow, they just follow the pattern without understanding the meaning, the real sense that originally based this pattern. Because the ancients did it, they repeat, and the external frame becomes tight, and we have the conventional age where the ensouling truth recedes into the background and things are carried on because they have always been carried on so. Things become what they call typal, that is, the mobility of movement in a society goes under, and certain types of profession, certain types of evocation, they stay set, and this is called the the conventional or the typal age. This continues for a long time, whether in the East or in the West. Society becomes encrusted with conventions. Classes, castes, they become hard frames in which the society has to fit in, and natural life suffers. So gradually the human spirit revolts against this kind of straitjacketing, and we have the individualist age, the age of reason, age of revolt, of reason, rationality against convention and custom. This movement in the West may be said to have reached a high point in the time of French Revolution, and it lasted at least for 2 centuries, where the freedom of the individual came to be recognized. The individual throws the yoke of the society on him and insists that the individual freedom is the most important value. The overthrow of the past standards, experimenting with a large number of new values, philosophies, standards, that becomes a common feature. But after 200 years, we can't say that the individual has really justified himself. This freedom won by the individual has led to certain anarchism in the name of democracy, one man, one vote, and it has led in certain areas, epochs, to extreme forms of self-aggrandizement, an unbalanced society where a smaller percentage of individuals favorably circumstanced have come to the top and tyrannized over the larger majority. So this has led the leaders of society to search anew for the meaning of social development as a protest and a reaction against the cult of the individual. There came the cult of the society, collectivity, particularly after the Bolshevik revolution in Russia. They say it is society that is important and the individual is a cell, and the individual always occupies a secondary role, whereas the collectivity should occupy the primary role. There has been a great controversy and a debate on this issue, whether the individual is important or the collectivity is important? Which is greater? And so the struggle goes on, and this has demolished many of the standards and ideals of the individualist age. The mind as the guide, as the leader of our civilization, that itself has been questioned. And the higher mind of humanity is probing beneath the mind, the reasoning mind. And as they probe deeper, they have come face to face with great energies of life, psychological depths which totally controvert the neat formalized systems of intellectual reason. And that is what you see in art, in poetry, in drama, in many fields where apparently it is a chaos, but it faithfully reflects the inner struggle behind the mind that goes on in the human being, particularly the writings and the novels written by authors in Russia. They portray the psychological struggle, the psychological conflict that rages behind the surface. And this is what Aurobindo calls the subjective age, where the collective mind has broken through the walls of the mind, intellect, and is feeling its way to find the secret of social development. And that struggle is on, what Aurobindo calls the subliminal, behind the external consciousness. There is a deeper level of existence. And there is an inner mind, there is an inner emotion, there is an inner vital, as inner physical. And that whole range of the subtler levels of existence behind the material formulation outside is called the subliminal. And the thinking mind of humanity, the artistic soul of humanity, the musicians, they are all feeling some rush of inspiration from these inner levels and are expressing them with a certain abandon, to which an ordinary person doesn't have a clue, and we just condemn or criticize them, saying that they are chaotic. But for the person who has drawn these pictures or written these poems, they are real experience. But in the very nature of things, this subjective age of humanity in which we are at present functioning is not the last, because there is a slow dawning of light that the source is in the soul. The worldwide awakening in matters of religion, occultism, spirituality is a symbol, a symptom of the deep awakening that is taking place, that the truth of things, truth of development, whether individual or collective, is from the soul. There is a level which is behind, deep behind the subliminal, where there is the psychic presence, the soul, evolving soul, and ultimately all is being governed, will be governed from there. The solution, the real solution to the problems that beset the society today, Sri Aurobindo points out, is to be found in the soul level, at the level of the soul consciousness. The quarrel between science and spirituality, between materialism and idealism, between the individual and the collectivity, the different sets of conflicts, they are resolved only at the level of the soul. That is the spiritual consciousness which holds the key to all these problems. It reconciles. All these problems are reconciled at a level of consciousness where their original drift is seen in clear terms. And human development is slowly driving towards that age, which Aurobindo calls the spiritual age. So it is not merely the individual whose destiny is to arrive at a spiritual realization, but the collectivity also, the general human society also has to arrive at its culmination in the spirit. And as a result of which, when each individual is awakened and feels oneness with the rest at the level of the self which he realizes, rooted in soul, rooted in love, emanates only love and becomes a contributive unit in total harmony. There is no more quarrel between individual and individual, between individual and the collectivity. There will no longer be a necessity for a government, for a law and order department to supervise and to ensure that nobody treads on the foot of another. Because in this consciousness there will be no other. All have the same one consciousness, a varied expression, but one identity. So as this consciousness develops, Sri Aurobindo sees the withering of the state. What the communist ideology foresees from a wrong end, Sri Aurobindo describes as inevitable once the larger mind of humanity accepts and bases itself on a spiritual consciousness. Then there will be no more necessity of control, of state supervision. The state will become ogiose, unnecessary. the functions of the state government will be gradually self-dissolving, and there will be what Aurobindo calls a spiritual anarchy. Spiritual anarchism, which does not mean anarchy in the normal sense, but in the sense that each individual will have total freedom to live, to express himself, and nobody will be moved to interfere with that person's freedom. And spiritual anarchy will result in a total peace, harmony, because it will be based on a deep sense of unity, harmony and love. When will it happen is left to the will of man. The cosmic spirit that presides over the development of humanity does not impose its will regarding the pacing. That destiny is sure, but how long we will take to arrive at that culmination is left to our good sense. That is the note on which Sri Aurobindo concludes his study of the psychology of social development. A series of essays which he wrote between 1916 and 20, and which he titled as the human cycle during later years before it was issued in book form. It is considered to be a classic on the social development of humanity. That brings our study of Sri Aurobindo's philosophy of evolution of the individual and the society to a close. And now I suggest that we break for about 15 minutes, and you should feel free to ask me questions. Questions, you see, not only on what we have talked, but any outstanding questions which you have not asked, because this period and the next two periods will be all. I don't think I'll be able to meet again in November. So please feel free to ask questions. Yes. 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 What I said was that we have in our system different centers of consciousness which fairly correspond to what are called nervous plexuses. Is that right? Nervous plexuses. And each center governs particular qualities, particular tendencies, particular movements. Now, this center at the base of the spine, called the basal center, governs the earth principle, meaning thereby matters of food, matters of physical sensation, sex, things on that level. A little higher, in the lower abdomen, somewhere at the root of the genitals, there is the second center governing the water principle, and it is the center of small emotional movements like jealousy, ill will, violence, petty desires, all small, meaningless. But when our consciousness rises to that level or is active in that level, our whole life is patterned on these small conflicts, petty movements which don't have much meaning but keep us occupied always. Higher than that, in the abdominal and navel center is the large life-wide movement, vitality, adventure, self-expansion, self-sacrifice, also self-domination. Large movements, heroic movements, they can. And in the heart center is the love. But as has been said, most of humanity is involved with the lower three centers. The highest is of adventure, pioneering, new ideas and things like that at the navel center. We are slowly working our way towards the heart center. Sense of unity, sense of harmony, sense of love. That is where we are now. We are now, the humanity generally now is between the third center and the fourth center, between the heart and the navel center. Individually, of course, there have been many who have reached the highest pinnacles of mind, who have crossed into the spiritual transcendence. That's another matter. But by the collective man, collective human is still struggling in these lower three levels. Yes.
The second chakra,
Yes.
Svadhisthana, the watery
Yes.
place,
Yes.
corresponds in Western anatomy and physiology to what is called the sacral plexus.
Right.
And I've always been struck that that word sacral is applied to that level
Yeah.
of these so-called petty emotions. And the other thing that struck me as you were talking about it is in Book 3 of Synthesis of Yoga, where Sri Aurobindo delineates the emotions that are channeled into the devotion to God. He talks about levels
Yes.
of emotion that move Godward.
Yes.
And that many of these feelings of jealousy and possessiveness and rejectedness and all are experienced by the bhakti in relationship to God, and in the process are transformed into powers of consciousness. And that perhaps that practice of devotion is part of the transformation of the
Yes.
second chakra.
Yes. The sublimation of human emotions in the divine moment is what covers what you described. That anger, self-resentment, brooding, all these things, they are turned against God. There is a cult of devotion where the devotee weeps, cries, complains that God has not revealed himself. I have been doing so much. I have been weeping my heart out. I have denied myself so many things. And that way that person works out that side of nature and he is purified. He rises above. And when he realizes that God has been more gracious, more kind, and has taken 2 steps for 1 step of his, he feels ashamed. That also is a spiritual moment. So, even the Indian system of devotional approach provides even for enmity with God.
That sounds so much like the stories of Shalom Aleichem.
For instance, it.
This side is Jewish humor,
I
in
see.
which there is that constant feeling about God having deserted him, and why did you put me in this situation? After everything I've done for you, Lord, why did you put me here?
Yes. Yes.
It somehow personalizes the relationship.
Relationships. Yes. Yes. These are areas where science and spirituality are going to meet. Where when we see in experience, both the approaches have common points. The words are different, the contexts are different. So, science and spirituality can never meet by arguing, but they will meet. Hegel made a very important discovery that there is always a thesis and an antithesis. But if you go on putting them opposite to each other, it will never end. Their reconciliation will take place in a higher level called synthesis. Thesis, antithesis, synthesis. Now, in course of time, that synthesis gets hardened and it splits. Another thesis and antithesis. And further, that way it goes on. Exactly what Mother says in a more understandable language. She says, you can never reconcile two opposite positions on the same level on which they have come into being. You have to go above, and there you see the reconciling ground. So science, spirituality, they will meet in the consciousness of the human being, spiritual consciousness. There you will find that both these are attempts from two sides, two corners, two ends, but they meet here. The human consciousness is the meeting ground of most of these age-long conflicting positions.
Pandit, we're talking about the individual soul and the national soul.
Yes.
And just thinking and carrying that along, is there also a planetary soul?
Yes, there is a world soul. It is not yet formed. It's gradually taking shape in the measure in which the various constituent souls, nation souls, gather and harmonize. The world soul becomes formed and articulate. But all the elements of the world soul are coming together. So there is a world soul, and in Sri Aurobindo's Epic Savitri, there is a canto devoted to the description of the world soul, which is the center of the whole world, from where all energies radiate. There is a plane of existence where the world soul is there. But here on earth, it will express itself only when all the peoples come together.
In the same way, as you were describing before the break, transformation of the individual soul.
Yes.
The transformation of the national soul only comes about through the consciousness of individuals.
Well, it will take a long time. But the national soul itself goes on putting a certain pressure on the leadership. Those people who lead, pressure is put upon them. If no such pressures work, then some shocks, disasters, wars, they are shocked into sanity. as in the case of an individual, so they are. Nature tries in many amicable and peaceful ways, but if we don't respond, then we are shocked into sanity. So it is really the leadership of the world community that has to decide. The common people are more or less, they will accept. But it is the leadership which is chauvinistic, which says my country, my nation, you are different. We have a right to exploit you in different ways. So it is the leadership. And it has undergone lot of changes. America has had very enlightened leadership at certain periods. Up and down, up and down. But after Roosevelt, Franklin Delano Roosevelt, no statesman of that stature has come up. He was not just a president of America, he was a world leader. After that, no such person has come who can have a world vision, identify himself. Now, our Indian Prime Minister, Jawaharlal Nehru, he was like that. He was a world man. See, and he sacrificed some of the national sovereignties in the interest of world peace. But later he realized he was fooled by China and others. He never believed in what is called realpolitik. And Churchill was his bitterest, Churchill regarded Nehru as the bitterest foe. And after India got independence, Nehru himself proposed that we shall stay in the British Commonwealth. We may be a republic, but we will be a member of the Commonwealth. And at a national banquet held in England, London, Churchill, the Prime Minister, he gave a public tribute that he is the greatest man that I have seen, who can forgive and do the gesture that he has done. And that is a historical moment. So the world leadership has to change. How long, we do not know really. The thing is, we have to accept the bona fides of each other. Someone was asking me the other day about the world peace movements. Now, how much of cheating is there in the world peace movement? Some documents have now come to light where the Soviet leadership has a regular plan to lull the Western powers into a false sense of security in the name of world peace movement. They will go on preparing their weapons and arms, and these people will be persuaded to disarm in certain areas. And when you are unawares, they want to take you by surprise. Now, whether these documents which have been published are forgeries or real, we do not know. Nowadays, nobody can take anything as true. There has been so much of forgery, false papers. So the international state of affairs are very discouraging at the moment. But still, something is pressing. Things will not go in the way the national leaderships are envisaging. The third world countries will come up. One sure result of breakthrough in the solar research will be that the third world countries will come up. Just as during the last decade, the Middle East countries have, been holding everybody at ransom. It won't continue like that.
Could you say something? I know you've been affiliated with this organization, World Union, and
Yes.
maybe Patel has been involved in also. Can you say something about the work of World Union and
Yes.
connections to the UN?
Yes. See, I have been associated working in an organization called World Union International. It is a 20-year-old organization based on one principle, that world unity can be achieved only on a spiritual basis. Some believe that world unity will be achieved on ideological basis, like the communist doctrine. Some believe it will be based on political and constitutional basis. Some say it on a religious basis, convert everybody to Islam, convert everybody to Christianity, and all will be one. So many people have many ideas. Mother narrates how in Japan, 1920 or so, she met Count Tolstoy's son, and he was touring all over the world to establish world unity. So mother asked him, how do you propose to do it? Then he said, I am going to make everybody wear the same dress and speak the same language. That will bring world unity. Now, such a thing can never happen. So, Sri Aurobindo believes that it is only the change of heart, a spiritual basis, that can make world unity real, lasting. The rest, it is all paperwork. So, we are working, creating a climate in different places, through literature, through discussions, through seminars, through conferences, to get individuals to accept this commitment on a spiritual basis, unity on a spiritual basis. And unity on a spiritual basis means first you do it in your own home. In your family, you have to first establish unity. You commit yourself to deal with your dependents or relations with love, yielding your ego to their ego to begin with. The head of a family to become a soul of a family. And it is only in the measure in which we subjugate our ego and make love and sense of unity the basis of life, that we can be effective and carry conviction in the general society when we talk. So we have few members, nominal fee, and we supply journals to them. I edit the journal, always putting forward and hammering the point that unless you feel it in the heart that you are one with so and so, that you have to have loving relations, unity can only be a empty phrase. Mentally you may understand, yes, all are our brothers, but when it comes to sacrifice, when it comes to subordinating my ego, I don't yield there. So World Union movement is one of the 200 and odd organizations working towards this goal, but this is the only one working on a spiritual basis. And we have affiliation to the United Nations. We are also members of an organization, in Los Angeles. It is the International Council of Cooperation, coordinating activities of various organizations in America. And recently there have been two conferences. World Federation Conference. One was held, I think, in Austria, and another I don't remember, where they have adopted a constitution for the whole world. So there are movements like planetary citizens, one constitution for Earth, all these. Now how they will fructify we do not know, but they all hammer at the same truth from different sides. And we have to go on creating climate in little pockets who believe in world unity and who practice that in their immediate environment.
No,
Yeah.
as you spoke of that, it's powerful to hear of the existence of all of these groups. And then I think of what you see when you turn on the television news every night and how focused it is on the exact opposite.
Yes.
And the role the media plays in making people believe that conflict is the only thing happening and egotism. And I wonder what the proper relationship of organizations such as World Union is to the media, or how to reach through the media to larger groups of people. Because there's always this danger of proselytizing also.
The media, such as we see on most of the channels here, they consider us as cranks, impractical people. And they will never give scope to us because their profession will be endangered. Sensationalism. But you have a channel, what is called public channel. I think in different states they have different numbers, which is entirely done on public subscriptions. And they put forward the right approach. And organizations like ours, they get scope on such media. But by and large, the media in America is very supercilious and creating a totally grotesque and an artificial image of life. Everything is totally a lie. It is a lie. I have stopped seeing the television now. I used to put it on just at 7 o'clock to hear this today news. But even that, there is so much of propaganda, so much of slant, that I got disgusted. It disturbs the vibrations of peace that I have. And I said, no, only when we want some amusement. Well, I enjoy the advertisements more than the news. Because we know there are advertisements, But the originality of the people, the children, all that is nice. But otherwise, it is a very suicidal thing that is going on. Misuse. Mother expected that the films and the TV would be great God-given means for the spread of enlightenment among millions and millions of people who don't know ABC in the different parts of the country. You are not going to teach them with paper and pencil. You can't. You can reach them only through these mass media. But the way it is misused in this country, that way BBC is far superior. In London I have seen, very educated, very responsible. That is why in most of the countries in the East, the TV is a government monopoly. In India also. They are agitating that we should be free, like democratic, like America, and give. But wisely, the leadership has not allowed the TV to go into private hands because they will misuse. And they are using it for educational purposes. But then, whichever party comes into power, as it happens in democracies, they use the TV against the other parties. So TV and other news media, I think they have to come into enlightened hands. There must be a public corporation like the BBC, not the government, but an independent corporation, which should direct the policies and see that it is really utilized for educating the public in matters of health, in matters of hygiene, in education, developing higher ideas, projecting the world.
There was a movement that I noticed there were some meetings for a press and media, using different kinds of media, that would be totally subscribed to by non-corporate interests, that is, individuals, and which was actually meant to be internationally based and had something to do with the World Constitution. And then they were going to approach different governments, elect representatives from different countries. But there seemed to be that movement to do something with that. But trying to do it in a way that was ideology, but they had an ideology.
Now, on a little more basic level, I can see the soul being enlightened. But I see the exact opposite happening too. It's as if the good are getting better and the worse are getting worse. How does that fit into our...
I think so. You see, you are right. It is the right diagnosis of the situation, because there is a certain freedom in evolution given by nature, and good tendencies, they go on getting better and better. Evil tendencies go on getting worse and worse. That is so even in each one of us, depending upon where we put our weight. And that is the freedom given to individual to progress, as Aurobindo says, to progress or to perish in ignorance. Individuals have that freedom, and that makes life interesting. And there is what is called bringing out the dregs for exposure to light and elimination. That also happens. In yoga particularly, when you start turning your energies towards the divine, turning your energies from the obscure to the enlightened levels, the most unimagined difficulties come up in your own nature. You would never have imagined that such things were hidden in you. If you try to control anger, jealousy, every day you will be confronted with situations where those things stare at you in your face. Now that is when you don't bother about them, they don't come there. They resent being asked to go, and they summon up all their strength and confront you. This is called an automatic raising up of the difficulties to be dealt with. Yes.
But the World Union International, I think it's a very, very good idea, and we should know how to apply to belong to that. And I know here in San Francisco of a group, it's called a Citizen of the World. And there is many branches all over the world.
Yes.
But the media never give anything, you know. And they had a convention last year to celebrate, if you can say that, Hiroshima. They gathered
Hiroshima.
1,000 people from all over the world belonging to that group, Citizen of the World in Hiroshima. And that were received by the authority over there and official people. But here we never knew anything on newspaper, on television, and nothing. It was a great affair, great happening. We never heard of it. They are, you know, like you say, those 200 million groups, they cannot work really on the open. They put the silence over them, like a veil.
Yes, yes.
I never heard, except in case like this, because I never heard of the World Union International.
On 20th of March this year, there was a unique function, all over the world, in which we participated in India. That is, it was, I think, World Citizens Day, March 20, and the mayor of San Francisco read out a message on some grounds outside the of council or something like that, and 7 mayors of 7 cities all over the world, they sent a message of allegiance to the World Citizenship Program, understand? And one came from India, one came from Japan. It may be the same thing that you say. And she read out those messages here, 7 messages. I believe she's a mayor. San Francisco mayor is a woman. Yes. And she read out, and it was splashed in papers all outside America. I don't know whether American papers noticed it or not, but outside America it was given very much prominence, and it was a very great day. I remember because I spoke on that day in India, and it developed a certain sense of solidarity with people of thinking the same way in different countries led by America. You know, much depends upon where America is going to throw its weight, because they are the only people who have the resources and the capacity to tilt the balance. So that way,
Funded in connection with resources and World Agriculture, World Food. Is this also part of the World Union International? Are they also concerned with feeding and the waste
I know
of
it is.
resources?
It is one of the specialized agencies of the United Nations. The what is called United UFA, FAO, yes, FAO, Food and Agriculture Organization, is it? FAO. They are handling it all over the world, and they don't have dealings with private bodies. They deal only through governments, because when they give so much grains and so much money and all that, they have not found it politic to entrust it to private agencies. So they want responsible bodies like the respective governments, and if the governments are corrupt, the thing never reaches the people concerned. And private organizations don't have that structure to function on a national scale. So we, for instance, World Union Organization, we may be about 15-20 people in the head office, and we may have units somewhere 3 people, 4 people. What we do is to people put in contact. We are kind of liaison people who contact the people concerned. Yeah.
What you said about the media in America. I come from a foreign country. It's my experience too, and it's the experience of a lot of foreigners that I know, that the press in America, the big media, is really amazing, how it gives only the press release of the government.
Mm-hmm.
And it's very open to discuss internal problems, some internal little problems,
Yes.
some details.
Yes.
But in terms of big international issues, it's really, it's a propaganda instrument.
Yes.
That's how I see it.
These local problems and things, they assume such huge proportions here. You lose sense of perspective. The rest of the world doesn't exist for them. You see, now in India, our normal newspapers have 8 pages. We can't afford to have more newsprint. 8 pages, out of which one whole page is given to international developments. Of course, 1 page for national, 1 page for local, and 1 page for advertisements and all that. But one whole page is given 8 columns or so for discussion of what happens in America, what happens in England, what happens in different countries. But in these papers, just a line. See, if something out of the way happens somewhere, they will give that. This happened in China and this happened in India. You see, this is sense of proportion is lacking.
Now I would like to address a question in this context.
Yeah.
Could you say anything about dark forces operating in the world? Because I think this is not just. I think this media is one very, very important. Is a key position
Yes.
in what's going on.
The media is in the hands of dark forces. You are right. Spiritualists have seen it and felt it. That it is in the hands. News media, power, money, these are in the hands of the adversary, not in the hands of men of God.
That brings me back to my question. We have the good getting better and the worse getting worse. So where's it all going to end?
Well, we have to be optimistic. We have to be optimistic. Ultimately, there is an absolute of good, but there is no absolute of evil. Because evil has no basis in truth. So it cancels itself at some stage. But good goes on developing and developing. So good has an absolute.
But it's stronger.
Yes, ultimately. Ultimately. Just as love is stronger than hatred. You know, there is a limit, hatred. But love, there is no limit. You can go on loving more and more, more and more. It multiplies.
Say a little more about dark forces. What is a dark force?
I tell you, yes. It is a common heritage of occult traditions all over the world that the divine, God as you call it, is represented by light, knowledge, love. Love, light, knowledge. And the adversary who opposes the divine rule, the divine glory, is a concentration of darkness, falsehood, and death. This struggle is going on not only in the universe but in the soul of man. Each human soul is a battlefield between the children of light and the hosts of darkness. So darkness, or the agents of darkness, are those that obstruct the way to the divine, to harmony, to love, to unity. And those that promote, they are on the side of light. They are on the side of God. So dark powers are those which put you back, pull you back, and they find their human instruments in people who put the clock of civilization backwards, who want to undo all that human progress has achieved. Just as Japanese, the Germans and the Italians at that time during the Second World War looked like achieving, putting back everything and bringing back the old dark ages. Luckily it was averted. And these dark forces get strength from each individual when that individual yields to their promptings. When I become selfish, when I deprive somebody else of what belongs, when I do something disharmonious, well, that adversary gets some support. When I am loving, when I am right, when I am truthful, the other side gets strength. So ultimately it is we who tilt the balance this way or that way.
At first you were talking about the problem of science and spirituality and how the science and spirituality they cannot integrate, or cannot meet in a mutually enhancing way at the ground in which they encounter. They need some other factor, some other element, some high state of consciousness. I'm just wondering if it is true that what do you think, is it possible that the same principle applies to dark and the light forces, in the sense that there are some other principle which needs to be added in addition to the battlefield of the two, which could somehow improve both as the
It's a very good question.
but instead of fighting, but somehow balancing elements. Since in the mythological perspective, the fight is inevitable, in a sense that there is always loser involved. If the light is going to win, then that's an expense of the dark. If the dark is going to win, that is on trickery, by tricking the light, and on expense of light, on expense of the light. So the battlefield is there because of the winner and loser. So do you think there is something that
Yes.
then
Yes. Because if you visualize this struggle as struggle between the right and the wrong, between light and darkness, there is a higher principle which is grace, the divine grace. And that grace operates not only in saving the right and the light, but also in converting as much as possible of the dark and the false towards the other side. It is a grace which is a transcending principle, which recognizes that even the wrong or the dark is only a misplaced right, a light in a wrong position, and accepts the claim of both to survive in a higher form. So in the older traditions, even the titans, even the dark brood, they are looked upon as original gods, divine power, children of God. They are also children of God. Not only the white but the dark children also are children of God. And the divine tries to convert them to its ways. The divine way is not to destroy as far as possible, but to convert. And that proceeds from a still higher level than the dialectics between the right and the wrong.
Two things come to mind, and I think both of them are from the Kabbalistic tradition.
I see.
In Kabbalah, there are three levels of the interaction of opposites, and the first is a warring of opposites. The second is a complementarity of opposites. And the third is a harmonization of opposites.
I see. Opposition, complementarity, harmonization.
And that the opposites that are evoked psychologically in certain Kabbalistic meditations are worked with until they're experienced at the highest level. And there isn't the idea of one overcoming the other as much as finding the essence of them in such a way that they harmonize.
I see.
And the other thing that came to mind is there's a story, a Kabbalistic story called the Golem, which is actually the more ancient version of what later became the Frankenstein myth, of a rabbi who created a small being out of mud and wrote the word truth on its forehead in Hebrew and brought it to light. And at the end of the day, he would erase the first letter, and it would change the word from truth to death. It would go back into the earth. And eventually it took on power and became an autonomous being that couldn't be controlled. But in the story, there's a part where a man, the protagonist or the hero, is confronted with the golem, and the golem is handing him these red seed pods, red and black, which I think symbolize witchcraft and evil. And he can't accept them because that will be accepting the evil into himself. And somehow he knows he can't reject them also, so he hits the golem's hand and knocks them onto the ground. And they go back into the earth as a continual source of new things growing up. And then somehow the dark principle has that power of germinating new things.
I see.
So it's neither accepted nor rejected in some ultimate way.
Did not Sri Aurobindo say that the light was found in the transformation of the dark? That the light itself came from looking in the dark and transforming those energies?
Perhaps it refers to mother's experience of going in a physical couch and pressing his spine. Did you tell that story?
But on a personal level, isn't it from integrating those dark forces?
Because their experience, Mother Sri Aurobindo's, was that in the heart of darkness there is light. If you go sufficiently deep, there is light. In the heart of inconscience, there is the consciousness.
There's a Christian thinker, C.S. Lewis, and he talks about how the problem of good and evil is a problem of choice, where somebody starts down a road, and once they're down this road, most of the decisions are going to be good. You have to invent them to be good. But once you go down the road, that's the wrong road. You make the wrong choice. It's like everything you do seems to be off a little bit, and you just get deeper and deeper into the wrong until you have to begin to retrace your steps to that original moment of choice, which you see happening in the moment, and which you can make the decision over again about which road to follow.
I was thinking that in a sense, but you mentioned that the dark, apparently that seems dark at first, actually it's not really dark in the sense that there is a force which does not have consciousness of its own. Does not have so I was just wondering that how much of the darkness is actually the cause of our own body system. How much do we attribute our own projections onto the forces which in themselves don't necessarily have the qualities of dark or light or good or bad, but perhaps upon our encountering the forces or the energy that we began to somehow attribute, give the feeling quality, and therefore actually perpetuate the. So I'm just wondering how much is our own kind of.
To a large extent. Nature is neutral. Many forces are neutral, and to a large extent they are coated by individual instruments. Yes?
There's a section in the Life Divine that I never fully understood. I think it's the chapter, the sevenfold Court of Being, one of the chapters adjacent to it. And Sri Aurobindo describes the relationship of consciousness and force to one another at these 7 levels of existence, and that at the lower levels, at the levels closest to matter, the force is operating with the consciousness totally separate from it and not involved in the force. And I wonder if the healing that we're talking about isn't somehow bringing that consciousness into those levels.
Yes.
So that the force is reunited with the consciousness.
Yes, exactly. I think we could stop today.